CEO's wife invited employee to mock her, but what happened next was incredible and transformative. As Sarah adjusted the sleeves of her best, and only, party dress, her reflection in the mirror blurred under the weight of impending dread. She had been working 2 50-hour weeks, stretching her energy from patient to patient at the hospital, where every life was a battle worth fighting. The invitation to the charity gala had arrived like a hailstorm, unexpected and unwelcome. It felt ridiculous, even cruel, to think that this party was crafted to humiliate her. The notice glittered with gold-flecked script, promising a night of elegance among glittering chandeliers. Did Brenda expect her to simply navigate the glitz and ridiculing laughter of the elite? Sarah's stomach twisted at the thought. As she entered the lavish venue, the overwhelming scent of fresh flowers was soon drowned out by the laughter and faint clinking of crystal glasses. A wave of anxiety crashed down on her, every head turning as if an unspoken judgment had been cast. The crowd was a sea of opulence, adorned in designer gowns and suits, while she felt like a vague outline, the stretched fabric of her thrifted outfit, barely masking her true self. An image of her patients materialized in her mind, single mothers juggling work, the elderly gripping tightly to their stories, people depending on her voice of calm amidst chaos. Flickers of resentment ignited as snide remarks drifted toward her. "What a curious invitation," one guest let out with a dismissive smirk. Just then, an unsettling thought gnawed at her. What if she was merely a pawn in a game disguised as charity? Would anyone truly care when spoke of their trials? Thoughts slammed against each other within her. Doubt clashing with determination, anxiety holding hands with rage. She felt pinned between her desire to step forward and the instinct to flee back into the safety of anonymity. As she connected with her husband's warm smile across the room, determination flickered in her chest. He nodded encouragingly, grounding her as the heat of judgment pressed down. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The moment she took a breath to speak, curiosity rippled through the crowd, somehow drawing their attention. Her heart raced, drawing on the familiar strength she wielded at work, the woman who faced emergencies without flinching. Sarah shared her story, beginning with her long shifts, recounting the sacrifices typical for someone in her position. A nurse who often put others before herself. For the first time, the buzz enveloping the room dimmed to a shocking silence as she laid bare the realities of her life, the joys intermingled with the weariness. But the atmosphere shifted, like a pendulum swinging painfully toward discomfort. She could see the tension hardening Brenda's mouth, the lines of distress scrawled across her forehead. In that moment, the gown-clad guests began weighing depth against appearance, comparison oozing from their wide eyes and nervous giggles. Sarah's resolve became a lighthouse among the darkness of elitism ignited by her words. As the walls of Brenda's carefully crafted world began to tremble, a wave of uncertainty drenched the air. The facade of superiority wavered. But would Brenda double down on her privilege, or take a leap into the empathy Sarah desperately sought? The night hummed with unresolved anticipation, hope tangled with fear lingering just above a boiling point. As Sarah sensed a shift in the energy, the stakes of their collision circled around her heart. She found it harder to breathe. Would bravery propel her forward, or would the gruesome weight of judgment pull her down? With every passing moment, as Sarah's voice wove through the crowd, she felt her connection to the room deepen. The flickering lights reflected uncertainty in the guests' faces, and she seized the moment. Unfiltered honesty surged within her, propelling her words and stripping away the layers of pretense. She exposed not just her experiences, but the unacknowledged struggles of those she had devoted her life to serve. the unsung resilience of her patients and their families. But then came the pivotal moment that gripped her heart. Brenda elevated her chin, her regal demeanor seemingly unyielded by Sarah's narrative. Instead of conceding, she stepped forward, the thin veil of superiority shrouding her like a shield. "And what, may I ask, do you think qualifies you to speak to these illustrious guests so candidly? Isn't your world too distant from the realities we face here?" A tension crackled through the air, and an invisible line was drawn. The words hung ominously, a challenge demanding confrontation. Sarah's fingers curled into fists, her pulse quickening. This wasn't merely about defending herself. It was the battlefield of every nurse, every caregiver, every invisible force holding society together. The moment demanded courage, more than she thought she possessed. "Maybe my world is distant," Sarah breathed, her voice steadier than her shaking hands. "But it's a world filled with humanity and struggle. A world where people fight for more than appearances and labels. I stand for those who are unseen in your world of glamour and luxury." The shift was palpable. Whispers swirled, ancient barriers of class shaken by vulnerability. But would that be enough? Brenda's reaction could either kindle a spark of social awareness or extinguish it into ignorance. In that charged silence, Sarah recognized the landscape of her ambition transforming. She was no longer just a nurse. She was a voice, potentially sparking a change far beyond the confines of this room. Yet, doubt crept back in. Would they listen? Or would they cling to their silken cocoon? She could feel the observations of others, scrutinizing, questioning, judging. Yet there was something else stirring beneath the surface. Curiosity? Hope? The vulnerability sparked a resonance amongst a few guests, the ones whose faces softened and caught her gaze. They saw her, and she felt a tinge of something evolving, a hint of empowerment. With newfound clarity, Sarah realized it was time to capitalize on the momentum, to turn the evening into a platform. "In my profession, I've learned that strength isn't just about persistence. It's also about vulnerability, authenticity, and the ability to connect in the face of hardship. If we allow ourselves to be more vulnerable, we might just find real strength together." Tension buzzed through the atmosphere as she rephrased her call to action into something the elite could grasp. "Let's collaborate to create change that echoes beyond this gala. Let's invest in education, healthcare, and support for our communities, where it truly matters." The applause began, a hesitant clap that grew into an unexpected wave as more guests joined in. But Brenda's glare burned sharper, her authority visibly threatened. There was danger in her eyes, and with it, clarity emerged for Sarah. This was no longer just about personal humiliation. It was a confrontation of values, between privilege and purpose. As new connections sparked across the room, Sarah's heart raced with both triumph and trepidation. Had she lit a flame of solidarity, or was she only inciting a greater backlash? It was time to prepare for the inevitable storm. The reality of facing Brenda's wrath loomed large. What were the lengths to which Brenda would go to retain her position? Would Sarah stand her ground or adapt to fight another day? The stakes had risen, and as she embraced this new role as an advocate, she felt the walls around her shift. But whispers of doubt remained. Could she truly confront the elite world that had always viewed her as merely a caretaker? With the applause still echoing, she faced the uncertain horizon ahead, ready to navigate the complexities of power and compassion, intersecting in one pivotal moment. Surely, the next confrontation would test her like never before. The applause eventually faded, but the heavy silence that followed hung thick in the room, suspended like a storm cloud ready to unleash its fury. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as she searched for familiar faces among the sea of skeptics. There were those who had responded with genuine warmth, eager to embrace her words, but the shadow of Brenda loomed larger, tainted with the spite and judgment that had always defined the upper echelons. Sarah's pulse quickened, her instincts sharpening. What would Brenda do next? The thought was jarring, a chill that settled in the pit of her stomach. Sarah had stepped into her truth, but that didn't buy her immunity. She moved to the side of the room, leaning against a wall, drawing breath to steady herself. Every fiber of her being shifted. Could she press this newfound influence further and make it count? Among the well-dressed crowd, mingling with half-hearted laughter and drinks, there was an undeniable energy crackling. The seeds of change had been planted, but the path ahead remained treacherous and uncertain. She caught sight of a few guests whispering, their gazes darting between her and Brenda. The power dynamics were palpable. A woman approached, pushing through curious onlookers. Sarah recognized her as Emily, the community outreach director for an influential charity. Emily's smile was warm, but there was urgency in her eyes. "Sarah, that was breathtaking," she exclaimed softly, barely audible over the rising din. "I've never seen anyone confront Brenda like that. You have a gift. Your voice could influence many." The gravity of Emily's words pressed down on Sarah. What if she could transform this moment of vulnerability into action? What if this gala could be more than just a platform for words? But as the thought took shape, another voice in her head countered. Could someone like her really manage that kind of influence? Emily leaned closer, lowering her voice. "I know you're new to this realm, but people are listening. You could galvanize support for something significant. Will you?" "Will I?" The question hung over her like a weight. Confidence fought a battle with self-doubt. What did she know about capturing the attention of the powerful? Yet wasn't that the very reason she had stood up, risking the ridicule that hung in the air? A voice rumbled through the gathering. Sarah turned to see Brenda approaching, her presence a storm cloud gathering near the horizon. The chilling air became electric, filled with tension. Sarah felt a vengeful surge within her, a newfound fierceness. "I stand for those who are unseen," she had said. Would she truly live those words, or retreat to silence when confronted? Brenda's thin smile did nothing to alleviate the tension. "Impressive speech, Sarah. But you must understand this. Social dynamics can be quite unforgiving. Are you prepared for the consequences of challenging established norms?" The challenge ignited a fire in Sarah's chest. "Maybe, Brenda, but those established norms are what have led to the neglect of the very individuals I care about." The room held its breath, and Sarah felt the rush of something powerful and exhilarating. She might not know how to navigate this elite world just yet, but clarity settled upon her. This was not just about her, and it never had been. With determination flooding through her, she resolved that if she could align with Emily, they could craft a call to action that transcended those oppressive norms. They could create a space where vulnerability became a bridge for understanding, not something to be mocked. Brenda's eyes narrowed, a flicker of anger showing through the mask of composure. "We will see how long that spirit lasts, nurse." The intensity surged, and Sarah understood there was a far deeper game at play. Brenda wouldn't simply take this lying down. She would retaliate. As Sarah prepared for the inevitable clash, her mind raced through potential alliances. How could she build a coalition from this moment? She needed insight, guidance. She needed support beyond the whispers of encouragement. Would she ally with others willing to challenge the status quo? Or would isolation wash her back into the shadows? The question loomed with urgent intensity. This was only the beginning. To confront the darkness, she had to confront herself first. Would she emerge stronger or crumble under the weight of expectation and fear? The lines were drawn, and the next move would alter everything. As the tension in the room began to dissipate, Sarah felt her heart race with disconcerting contradictions. The thrill of her courageous stand battled against a creeping uncertainty. She had just declared her intent to challenge the realm she had previously seen as impenetrable, yet the specter of doubt lingered. Would her voice truly matter in this gilded cage of power? Emily's encouragement echoed in her mind, urging her forward. There was an undeniable sense of urgency now. Brenda may have cast a shadow of ridicule, but Sarah understood it wasn't just about bending to fear. It was about harnessing this moment to ignite real change. A flame of determination sparked within her. She pushed herself away from the wall, ready to confront the uncharted path ahead. Taking a deep breath, she sought out Emily once more amidst the shifting crowd, who now buzzed with half-hearted chatter. She needed clarity. "Emily, can we talk?" she called, her voice cutting through the din. Emily turned, her eyes widening in surprise but filled with palpable enthusiasm. "Yes, absolutely. Over here," Emily beckoned, leading Sarah to a quieter alcove, partially draped in shimmering fabric that offered a brief sanctuary from the chaos. "Did I really mean what I said back there?" Sarah questioned, a tremor in her voice. The gravity of having challenged Brenda began to take root in her mind. Was that a step too far? "No," Emily replied firmly, her expression fierce. "You were authentic. You didn't just stand up. You awakened something vital in this space. You have a genuine chance to connect with others who feel the same way you do. But it won't be easy." "Then what's next?" Emily leaned closer, her eyes shimmering with an idea. "Let's harness that response. Together we can galvanize the people who, like you, want to see change. We need your story and your voice. You're their bridge." Sarah felt a rush of adrenaline. "But how do I even begin? I feel like a fraud standing among them." "That's the paradox," Emily replied, her smile backlit with wisdom. "You're not. Remember, your experiences shape you. It's about inviting others into that story, creating a narrative that resonates. You challenge the status quo by sharing your truth, not pretending to be someone you're not." The thought resonated with Sarah. Each whisper of doubt began to fade as her mind flashed with possibilities. She thought about the countless people in her nursing field, whose voices had been stifled, overshadowed by corporate interests. If she could harness her vulnerability into a campaign for change, she could be the catalyst they needed. "All right," she declared, adrenaline coursing through her veins. "Let's do it. I want to write something, but how?" "Let's create a narrative framework, something that highlights the struggles and triumphs of healthcare professionals forced into silence. We're not just raising awareness, we're showcasing real stories, linking them with actionable steps for the community." Sarah felt a tremor of excitement ripple through her. Clarity had emerged from chaos. Brenda's condescension would be met not just with resistance, but by a collaborative voice aimed at dismantling the very norms that oppressed them. Yet even as Sarah embraced this newfound direction, a seed of doubt kept planting itself. Brenda had promised consequences. What would those entail? As Sarah and Emily brainstormed ideas, an anxious thought wove through Sarah's mind. Could she truly bear the weight of this new expectation? What if her attempt to mobilize support opened her to attack from those she sought to inspire? Their discussion deepened into strategies and visions as ideas clashed and sparked. Sarah realized she couldn't back away now. She had already ignited hearts with just a few words. Now it was time for action. The challenge ahead felt daunting, but her spirit surged with a determination that shocked even her. This was much bigger than a single moment. She risked becoming a beacon of change, but vulnerability isn't easily wielded. And then, as they solidified their plans, Sarah spotted Brenda once again across the room, her expression unreadable, but her presence unmistakably menacing. Circular thoughts began to spiral around in Sarah's mind. What was Brenda concocting now? This fight was far from over, and the stakes had grown palpable. They were entering a dangerous game with the upper echelon, where every move was scrutinized. With a renewed sense of purpose hardening within, Sarah steeled herself for the next confrontation. The foundation of her ambitions was laid, but as shadows you couldn't see loomed around her, a final question burned brightly in her thoughts. What collateral damage would this bold pursuit cost her? And who would she lose in the battle ahead? The air in the alcove felt charged as Sarah and Emily transitioned from brainstorming to strategizing. The intoxicating mixture of hope and apprehension simmered beneath the surface. Each option they discussed seemed laden with potential and peril. "What about an open letter?" Sarah suggested, though uncertainty clung to her words. "It could outline our experiences, the struggles we face daily. It could create a narrative that pulls people in." Emily nodded, her brows knitting thoughtfully. "That's a great start. But it must be more than just words. It should evoke emotion and inspire action. What unique angle can you bring?" Sarah's mind whirled. How could she present her truth in a compelling way without drowning in fear? The reality of Brenda trying to undermine her loomed in her thoughts. What was really at stake? Suddenly a memory flooded back. Her first day as a nurse, brimming with dreams. The determination to impact patient care. To give a voice to the unheard. "I could share stories," she said, her conviction gaining strength. Personal ones. About the long nights, the moments of doubt, how corporate policies tug at our abilities to perform our jobs. I want to show our vulnerability. Not as a weakness, but as a strength. Emily's smile widened, understanding coursing through her. Exactly. Vulnerability breeds connection. You're not just writing, you're forging a path for others to join you. You encourage them to share their truths. That's powerful. As they spoke, little by little, the voice inside Sarah shifted from apprehension to burgeoning courage. Her personal experience wasn't an anchor. It was a key, unlocking not just her potential, but the hidden stories of countless others. And yet the ghost of Brenda's scorn lingered. "What if I fail?" Sarah asked, the weight of her fears falling heavily into the air between them. "What if I expose myself and it backfires?" Emily's eyes sparkled with determination. "Risk is part of growth. That feeling you have now? It's not going away. The difference lies in how you choose to face it. Would you rather stay silent and allow those stories to fade, or take the leap and write? You've already painted that picture of truth, a stark contrast to the facade Brenda upholds." The realization struck Sarah. To remain passive would be a disservice not only to herself, but also to her colleagues. They were relying on someone to take the plunge. She needed to be the catalyst for this shift, the voice amplifying those who feared to speak. Bracing herself against the wall, Sarah felt a surge of resolve that ignited her very bones. The more she immersed herself in the thought of shared narratives, the more empowered she became. She wanted people to hear the cries for change echo in her words. "I'll do it. I'll write, and I'll invite their stories." But just as their plans took shape, Brenda emerged from the swirling crowd once again, her laughter cutting through the air like a sharpened blade. Beside her, a group of executives looked on, eyes alight with intrigue. Sarah's stomach twisted, the spectral anxiety reviving within her. "Focus, Sarah," she reminded herself. "Keep your eyes on what matters." Brenda's condescending presence was merely another obstacle, a challenge to override. "Let's meet again tomorrow," Sarah urged Emily, trying to hold on to the momentum. "We can finalize the outline then." Emily's expression was a mixture of admiration and pride. "You're already drawing the lines of change. It takes courage to pen your truths. I'll be here every step of the way." As they parted, Sarah felt a flood of feelings, fear, determination, and an odd exhilaration that blurred the lines of her anxiety. The writing might unleash more than just words. It could dismantle an oppressive tide. With her heart racing, she stepped away from the alcove, planning her next steps. But the gnawing questions simmered within her. What explosive reactions awaited her once the ink met the paper, transforming the shadows into an undeniable light? Her path was set, yet the specter of retribution hovered ominously over the horizon. She had touched upon a revolution that could reshape their narrative, but would she be ready for the storm it might unleash? The next morning, As dawn broke and sunlight streamed through her bedroom window, Sarah sat on the edge of her bed, the coolness of the wooden floor beneath her grounding her racing thoughts. She felt a tumultuous mixture of excitement and dread as she recalled her commitment from the previous day. The weight of her task settled heavily on her shoulders. There was no turning back now. She had made her choice, and it felt simultaneously exhilarating and terrifying. She picked up her laptop and opened a blank document. The silence of the early hour enveloped her, but the stillness sparked a sense of urgency. She needed to capture her thoughts and emotions before the noise of doubt crept in. Sarah's fingers hovered over the keyboard, a blend of trepidation and resolve coursing through her. This wasn't just about sharing her story. It was about liberating a collective voice. As the cursor blinked back at her, memories came flooding forth. The patient who shared her fears, the coworker who had whispered her frustrations in the break room, and the countless nights of feeling unheard and undervalued. Channeling that energy, Sarah began to write, letting words pour forth like a long-awaited waterfall. The narrative flowed, weaving together the threads of her experiences, yet her mind would endlessly return to Brenda, her laughter echoing, a constant reminder of the risks at stake. What would Brenda think? What would the executives do if they felt threatened by the sentiments Sarah planned to express? Each thought made her fingers hesitate, but she pressed on. It was key to illustrate not just the struggles, but also the resilience that resilience had forged within her. As she crafted sentences, insight struck Sarah. This writing process wasn't solely an act of rebellion. It was an act of self-affirmation. With each paragraph, the fear felt less like an enemy and more like a compass, guiding her toward honesty. The deeper she dug, the less she was haunted by what others thought. A profound strength blossomed within her, transforming her narrative into something more akin to a battle cry. Suddenly, she was jolted from her concentration when the familiar ping of a notification rang out. A message from Emily appeared on her screen. "Ready to tackle our outline? I have ideas that tie into your narrative." Moments later, another sound echoed. A group chat flared alive as other colleagues, whom she had reached out to, began engaging, sharing snippets of their own challenges. Fuel surged through Sarah as she read their messages. She wasn't alone. Solidarity ignited a fierce clarity. She wasn't merely representing her voice, but amplifying an entire collective. A rush of determination propelled her fingers back to the keyboard, flowing between her personal account and the echoes of shared stories from her colleagues. But just as the urgency propelled her onward, a wave of doubt swept over her again. What if her colleagues weren't as brave as she intended them to be? What if they faltered under the scrutiny of the corporate gaze once this letter circulated? Would she truly be able to shield them from the possible backlash that Brenda, her professional rival, might orchestrate? Her heart hammered in her chest as the specter of her fears rose, ugly and distorted. The vision of Brenda's contempt flashed in her mind, coupled with an audience of executives eager to deny or dismiss the truths Sarah wanted to voice. Questions pinged relentlessly through her mind. What rights did she have to speak for others? What if her words didn't ignite change but instead wreaked havoc on her colleagues' careers? Taking a moment, Sarah drew in a breath. She realized that the real act of courage was rooted in this very dilemma. Acting was necessary, but she was also acutely aware of the moral obligation that accompanied her. Perhaps she should address the risks up front in her letter, inviting those willing to collaborate. This epiphany pushed Sarah back toward her laptop. She was ready to embark on this new chapter of her professional journey, ready to confront and embrace the chaos, not just for herself, but for those she had spoken for. She typed rapidly, resolutely archiving her evolving thoughts and emotions, the echo of her colleagues' backing driving her resolve further. With a click of the keyboard signaling the beginning of a movement, Sarah stood on the precipice of no return. In the face of potential fallout, she had chosen courage. As she reviewed her work, adrenaline coursing through her, She felt an unsettling yet electrifying anticipation surge within her, knowing she would have to answer the looming question. How would she navigate the inevitable confrontation with Brenda regarding her newfound declaration of autonomy? As the morning light poured into her small home office, Sarah leaned back, her heart tethered to the keyboard. She was not ready to face the confrontation with Brenda, but the urgency of her mission pushed her forward. Voices still chimed in her mind, her colleagues' stories swirling into a tempest of unaddressed grievances, a storm she felt duty-bound to confront. She needed a strategy, a calculated approach that could turn this personal struggle into a formidable stance. Sarah quickly turned to her notes, flipping through pages of thoughts that had taken shape during her late-night brainstorming. Bullet points and scribbled reminders jumped out at her, offering fragmented glimmers of hope. She needed to craft a preface, something that would contextualize her writing. She began to type, channeling her lingering anxiety into a structured outline. Acknowledging the risks was essential, she asserted. She could not bear the weight of her message alone. If she wanted to mobilize any form of change, she would need to build a coalition of trust and transparency with her colleagues. Each colleague represented not just a shared struggle, but tangible courage. The thought invigorated her, pushing her to lay out how individuals individually faced her office environment, how Brenda's reign sowed seeds of fear, and how together they could redefine their narrative. Her determination crystallized further as she formulated ideas around how to initiate a group discussion. What if she encouraged an open meeting, a safe space where people might feel empowered to voice their fears, their hopes, and their frustrations? This collaborative approach could mitigate the risk of backlash, present a united front, and potentially dismantle the intimidating hierarchy that loomed over them. Yet, as inspiration flowed, doubt crept back in. Sarah's mind buzzed with what-ifs. What if Brenda caught wind of that meeting? What if her colleagues, alarmed at the prospect, hesitated or failed to show up? She clenched her hands, feeling the familiar pang of insecurity wash over her. The reality of her role as a catalyst weighed heavily. Could she truly lead this charge without inadvertently putting her peers at greater risk? In the quiet of her office, Sarah recognized the truth. This journey was about more than just the confrontation with Brenda. It was about discovering her own voice and the complexities that came with wielding it. She remembered times when she too had felt like a mere shadow in the background, overshadowed by dominant personalities. The shift demanded not just bravery from her, but a commitment to stepping into the light, to inspiring others to do the same. With renewed clarity, she began to articulate her mission in a succinct paragraph, detailing her motivations while framing a call to action. This wouldn't just be a defense against Brenda's potential retaliation. It would be an invitation to dialogue, to redefine workplace culture, reminding her colleagues that their experiences mattered. But January felt heavy in the air, laden with the uncertainty of the unknown. A notification chimed, breaking her contemplative state. Emily's name appeared, suggesting they prepare yet another outline, but Sarah hesitated. Was she ready to share her thoughts? Her fingers stilled, and she debated sending a premature message. Yet this moment was pivotal. She realized she couldn't merely observe from the sidelines any longer. She needed to act. She quickly replied, suggesting they meet that afternoon, hoping the collective energy would reignite the momentum she desperately sought. As she hit send, her pulse raced once more, anticipation sparking within her. This first step could lead to a profound transformation, not just for herself, but for everyone who had been silenced for too long. With every word, Sarah felt a sense of solidarity forming. It was exhilarating, intoxicating even. Unbeknownst to her, however, the ripples of her actions were already attracting Brenda's attention. The air thickened with unspoken tension as Sarah prepared herself for the inevitable confrontation looming over her journey. The distance between her and Brenda had never felt narrower, and she braced for the moment when they would finally collide. The clock was ticking, and Sarah knew her time was running out to make a decisive impact. Would she falter as conflict drew near, or would she rise to meet the challenge of standing firm in her authority? The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the office windows as Sarah sat across from Emily, her heart pounding against her ribcage. The weight of her thoughts hung heavy in the air, mingling with the fragrance of freshly brewed coffee. Sarah had sufficed on caffeine and adrenaline since she'd sent that significant message. Today was supposed to spark something new, something bold, but doubt flickered like a candle, threatening to extinguish the flame she had desperately ignited. Emily was scribbling notes on her notepad, her brow furrowed in concentration. "What are we hoping to achieve, really?" she asked, breaking the charged silence. "What does success look like for you?" The question echoed through Sarah's mind, pulling her focus back from the unsettling vision of other eyes monitoring their conversation. Success, she reflected, looks like a workplace where everyone feels valued and safe to speak out. But even as she articulated her vision, the memory of previous discussions flooded her, whispers of discontent drowned by the timidity that Brenda's dominance had imposed. "I need this," she added, more to convince herself than Emily. "We need this." A shift in Emily's posture indicated her willingness to support Sarah's initiative. "Then, let's approach it with that mindset," she said, looking up, her eyes bright with potential. "Create the dialogue around individual experiences. Make it personal." As they brainstormed together, Sarah felt a flicker of the coalition she'd envisioned. The excitement mingled with apprehension, the realization of being on the precipice of change. Emily's suggestions bolstered her resolve, and Sarah began to map out the types of stories she hoped to draw from their colleagues. Each experience shared would weave a larger tapestry of discontent, showing Brenda that they were no longer isolated, but collectively strong. Yet, just as clarity emerged, an overwhelming wave of fear threatened to crash in. Would her colleagues feel the same liberation she hoped for? Or would they shrink back into the shadows? What if Brenda intervened, wielding her authority to silence them as she had done before? Sarah's stomach twisted at the thought. Brenda's scrutiny felt like a thundercloud looming on the horizon, ready to rain down consequences. But part of her recognized that failing to act would be a betrayal, not just of herself, but of those who had been waiting for someone to speak. This was no longer just about her conflict. It became about the culture of the entire workplace. "Fear can't keep us from engaging," Sarah said suddenly, her resolve sharpening. "If we're afraid of the consequences, then Brenda's already won." With a deep breath, she pushed fear aside. This was a defining moment that required her to face both Brenda and herself. "Let's send out the invitation tonight," Sarah declared, feeling a surge of determination. "We'll schedule the meeting for Thursday. No backing down." Emily nodded, her enthusiasm bubbling over. "I believe in this, Sarah." When the meeting details were shared with their colleagues, every ping of a notification felt like an electric jolt. Anticipation surged through Sarah, but soon morphed into a nagging anxiety. What if no one came? Would the silence speak louder than their collective voices? As the days ticked by, the tension built not only between Sarah and Brenda, but within Sarah herself. She felt herself teetering on the edge of something monumental, the desire for change battling the instinct for self-preservation. Finally, Thursday arrived. Sarah stood in front of a small gathering of co-workers, her heart racing as they shuffled into the conference room. She could sense the tremor of doubt in the room, but she also felt a flicker of potential, a spark that promised movement. The door closed with a definitive click, sealing them into the space where transformation could either ignite or extinguish. As she opened her mouth to speak, an unmistakable sound echoed from the hallway. A commanding voice, unmistakably Brenda's. The moment of truth seemed to hang in the air. Would she be ready to confront the turbulence that lay just beyond the door? This was just the beginning. but the stakes couldn't feel any higher. Sarah inhaled deeply, feeling the weight of her colleague's expectation behind her. All eyes were on her. Would she take control of the moment, or would the shadow of Brenda snuff out their shared light? There was no turning back now. The moment stretched thin, like a taut wire ready to snap. Sarah could feel her pulse thrumming in her ears, drowning out the concerns that whispered insidiously in her mind. She had structured this meeting to be a sanctuary for their voices, a chance to confront the discontent that lingered like smoke. But in the presence of Brenda's impending arrival, fear flickered dangerously close to taking hold. The first question settled like a stone on her chest. What if Brenda walked in and mocked their efforts? It wasn't an unfounded thought. She was known for her dismissive remarks, her ability to shatter confidence with just a few pointed phrases. But this was Sarah's initiative. This was her moment, and backing down would mean surrendering not only her ambitions, but also the trust of everyone present. Think of the stories, she told herself, grit replacing uncertainty as her fingers clenched the edges of the podium. They need this. You can't falter now. She sensed Emily's presence beside her, a grounding force anchoring Sarah amidst the turbulent sea of potential consequences. The warmth of solidarity shot through her. This was no longer just a personal fight. It was a collective battle against silence and oppression. Just then, the door swung open, revealing their small assembly of colleagues, each one carrying varying expressions of trepidation, hope, and curiosity. They shuffled in and settled, whispers mixing with the faint clicking of pens. Sarah studied their faces, searching for reassurance among the sea of uncertainty. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice steadier than she felt. "I know it's challenging to be here, but we all share an experience that deserves to be acknowledged. Change requires courage, and together, we create a stronger narrative." With each word, she sensed the wall of doubt in the room slowly dissolving. Eyes shifted from the floor to her, and comments of agreement murmured through the attendees. Sarah was igniting something. As she opened up the floor for stories, a courageous voice broke the initial silence. Michael, a quiet analyst, recounted a time when he felt belittled in front of his peers. With each story shared, the room began to breathe as personal experiences poured out like wellspring, raw, honest, and unapologetic. But as she leaned into this surge of collective energy, a familiar voice echoed ominously from the hallway just outside, a reminder of the looming threat. Brenda had arrived. Sarah's stomach knotted. She could hear Brenda's laughter, filled with derision, as the door opened and the executive stepped in, her presence eclipsing the atmosphere. "Well, well, what do we have here? A little circle of grievances?" The tension shifted palpably. It was as if an icy wind had swept through the room, chilling the warmth they had cultivated. It would have been so easy to let Brenda's words dissolve their courage, to melt back into silence. But Sarah stood her ground, her mind racing for a strategy. "Actually, Brenda, we're discussing how to foster a more open environment here," she declared, the intensity in her voice gaining momentum. "This meeting is about empowerment and transparency. Everyone deserves to feel they belong." The audacity of her response took her by surprise, as if the words had sparked within her a surge of defiance she hadn't anticipated. She could see Brenda pause, caught off guard, uncertainty flickering behind her well-practiced facade. Would this be the moment that defined her? Would Brenda retreat, or unleash full force in retaliation? The outcome of this confrontation loomed over them, intentions and fears clashing in the charged air. As she stared into Brenda's carefully maintained composure, an unfamiliar recognition dawned within Sarah. The voice of a leader began to rise, one who could bathe in the light of her convictions without succumbing to intimidation. The room resonated with palpable anticipation, and the stakes felt impossibly high. Here she stood, on the cusp of a transformation. Would it all unravel? Or was this the moment she would seize to reshape not just the conversation, but their collective future? With another deep breath and a steady gaze focused on Brenda, Sarah stood ready, awaiting the next move that would either solidify her rise or drive her deeper into the shadows. One thing was certain: the tides were shifting. "Are you really ready for a change, Brenda?" she challenged, as the air thickened around them. As silence filled the room, Sarah took another step forward, feeling the power of her decision to confront not just her boss, but the limitations she had placed upon herself. Change was within reach, and she had become its unwavering catalyst. What would Brenda do next? Brenda's expression shifted, a subtle crack in her composed facade as she absorbed Sarah's bold challenge. A flicker of surprise danced in her eyes, but it quickly morphed into defiance. "Change? You think this is a matter of will? This is my domain, and I protect it fiercely." Determination surged within Sarah. This wasn't just a battle for her own dignity. It was a fight for every nurse, caregiver, and invisible worker associated with the grim realities of the healthcare system. She felt the gathering of her colleagues around her, silent witnesses, their former trepidation slowly morphing into solidarity. "People in our field are rarely given a voice," Sarah continued, her own authority solidifying as she spoke. "It's about more than just grievances. It's about improving our environment so that we can perform our duties effectively. We can't keep papering over the cracks. They need addressing." Brenda opened her mouth as if to dismiss Sarah, but the tide was turning. A few of Sarah's colleagues began to lean in, nodding, sharing looks of understanding. Voices began to rise, expressing solidarity with Sarah's declaration. "Sarah's right," chimed in Michael again, chiming with newfound vigor. "If we want to ensure better care for our patients, we need to start here." The room buzzed with palpable energy, a growing wave of momentum that pushed against Brenda's authoritative tide. Sarah felt an electrifying shift. Fear dissipated like mist under the morning sun. "And what about the long hours? The emotional toll?" Another colleague chimed in, emboldened by Sarah's stand. "We need support from leadership, not conformity to unrealistic expectations." These voices of dissent coalesced, warming the air and breathing life into their silent frustrations, each brave declaration accumulating like a snowball rolling down a hill, gaining both size and speed. Brenda recoiled slightly, clearly rattled as the collective voice of employees challenged her. "This is irresponsible," she retorted, effortfully regaining her composure. "Don't pretend you can just speak openly without consequences." "Perhaps it's time those consequences were revealed," Sarah quipped. Her voice, now firm and unwavering, struck a chord with her colleagues. "We want to be heard, not hushed. This is about nurturing a culture that fosters meaningful contributions. We want acknowledgement, and we need it now." For the first time, Sarah sensed a ripple of unity coursing through the room. They weren't just individuals standing against an established order. They were part of something larger that had woven itself into their shared destiny. The door had swung open, and now it was Brenda who seemed trapped by uncertainty. The realization that the esteemed power she wielded could be challenged began to dawn upon her. "Change, after all, often starts from within," Sarah asserted, lifting her chin, a newfound confidence radiating from her presence. "It takes courage to admit mistakes and embrace growth. Why can't we do this together?" Silence hung in the air as the other employees absorbed Sarah's proposition. One by one, they nodded, voices small yet mighty, kindling the embers of her message. Brenda, despite herself, was met with a chorus of affirmations from co-workers who had long hidden in the shadows. "I'll back her," Emily declared decisively, drawing the attention of the others. "This is our chance. Together, we can initiate policies and systems that support well-being. Our experiences matter." With collective encouragement bursting forth, the room seemed to radiate with a wave of confidence. Sarah had become the beacon of transformation, uniting disparate voices into a singular cry for dignity. In that charged moment, The authority and power Brenda had so expertly wielded seemed to crack, like ice underfoot. One final challenge surfaced from Sarah as she turned toward Brenda, boldly meeting her gaze. Will you join us in this journey toward change, or will you remain a reluctant entity resisting the inevitable? Brenda hesitated, the tide having shifted entirely. For perhaps the first time, she was not just the enforcer of norms, but confronted with the prospect of reevaluating her own approach. As the realization of her vulnerability settled over her, Sarah felt a pulse of triumph surge through her. This was it. Not only had she confronted her fears, but she had also galvanized an entire room to take a stand for what was right. In those lingering moments, as eyes turned back toward her in expectancy, Sarah understood she had achieved more than she had anticipated. She would not only be seen as a nurse, but also as a respected leader, forging alliances that would reshape the very fabric of their workplace culture. Brenda's walls were trembling, and as she opened her mouth to respond, Sarah took a deep breath, feeling the sheer weight of transformation pressing in on all sides. She had conquered her fears, proven her worth, and ignited a movement toward genuine empathy and understanding. As uncertainty unfurled before them, it filled Sarah with solid confidence, promising new beginnings. The tension had transformed into a collective resilience, and change had just been set firmly in motion, a tangible testament to her growth. This was her achievement, not just for herself, but for an invisible workforce finally stepping into the light, armed with voices ready to reshape their world. As the meeting transitioned from confrontation to collaboration, Sarah felt a profound sense of accomplishment enveloping her. The door had cracked open, and though the journey ahead was yet uncertain, she was now fully committed, and she finally belonged not only to herself, but to every individual she vowed to advocate for. You need to subscribe now so you don't miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and spread this vital message. Comment your reactions and theories about this incredible transformation. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to join this narrative of personal overcoming. Don't wait even one more second to share. Every voice counts in our journey to empowerment.